I've had a lot to think about since I've had an extraordinarily large number of comments on my video, why I was released early from the High Council. And if you haven't watched that video yet, for some context of what's been going on in my life for the last couple weeks, I would encourage you to watch that. And I've been put in a kind of a dilemma in the past few years as I started to open my eyes and see better, see more clearly. And the dilemma that led to my being released from the High Council was that I believed that my tithing funds were not being properly used. And so I have taken those and put those elsewhere. And there are a lot of people in the comments that astoundingly have completely agreed and said that they see the same thing. But there's also a contingent of other people in the comments that basically says that I'm apostate, that I need to just follow the prophet, that the brethren know better than I do. And so that's kind of led me to, and it's good to check yourself. It's good to wonder about this. And of course, I have checked myself many times because my desire is not to get likes on my videos. My desire really is to align myself more closely with Jesus and what he would do. So as I get these replies, I wonder what the split is on those who say, just throw your tithing over the wall to the brethren and have faith and let them be accountable for that. And also they say, this is the Lord's money and the brethren are going to spend it the way the Lord wants to. And what I wonder is if, number one, if the people who are making this comment have read their scriptures and have seen what has happened in the last 6,000 years of the history of the world, where we've had things repeated over and over and over again, where a new dispensation comes and things become corrupted and things are not done in the most ideal way possible, and that there are these bright lights of people who come in and make corrections. This is over and over again in the Book of Mormon. You have people like Alma and the sons of Mosiah and Captain Moroni and Nephi and Lehi, people who, we start off from page 1 of the Book of Mormon with Lehi realizing there's something wrong in the church and hoping that the church will make some correction. And so God asks him, and I'm not comparing myself to Lehi, but God asks him to go and preach repentance to the people and tell them they need to change or Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. I mean, this is page 1 of the Book of Mormon, the book that's for our day. And they are a churchy people. They have a religion. They have a priesthood authority. They have a temple. They have synagogues. They, according to Laman and Lemuel, they were living up to all of the statutes of the law of Moses, and yet they were about to be destroyed. So that's page 1 of the Book of Mormon, and Lehi is called out of that and called out of that religion. I'm not saying I've been called out of the religion at all, but that is the circumstance in the Book of Mormon, page 1. We also see Jesus comes to a church and a priesthood and temples and priesthood authority, high priests, Sanhedrin. They have the Pharisees, they have the Sadducees, they have the Essenes, they have all the various different sects of the church in that day, and Jesus doesn't join himself to any one of them, and he doesn't bow to the authority of the high priests. He tries to teach them. He tries to teach leaders of the church a better way, and he tries to make some corrections there. But as he preaches in their synagogues, instead of welcoming his teachings and welcoming that better way, he's cast out of the synagogue. So Jesus spends his time on hillsides and mountaintops and outside of Jerusalem and outside of the church, because he realizes that things are not exactly as they should be in the church of his day. Now, there are countless examples. Jesus formed a church, he set it up, and that was taken, and basically by the Catholic Church that was taken over and institutionalized and made into a religion where you had to support the keys and the prophet, or I should say the Pope, and that the prevailing instruction in that church was follow the Pope because he has the keys. He holds the keys of salvation or hell, and you need to follow him because Peter was given the keys, the Pope took the keys. Follow the keys. And so largely for 1500 years, people spent their time following popes. If you know any of the history of the Catholic Church and the popes, it went very much downhill. It was not a good thing, and they spent their money not helping the poor and the needy, but on massive cathedrals. And I visited a lot of those in Europe. Beautiful, gorgeous, love visiting them. But as I visit those towns, there are massive structures, as opposed to the places that the poor people lived in their towns. The most expensive, exquisite buildings in Europe were built by the Catholic Church while the people suffered. And basically the popes reigned with blood and horror on the earth for a very, very long time. And we applaud the people like Martin Luther, who reformed those teachings so that the restored gospel could be brought back. We applaud Martin Luther because he realized that there were some things that were wrong, and he helped sway things back in a better direction so that people could be more awake and read the scriptures for themselves. People like William Tyndale, who helped get scriptures to the common man in their own language, especially in England. But there were many, many people like this. Now, we have a very similar situation, at least in my view, in our day, where the church that we have today doesn't very much resemble the church back in Joseph's day. The gospel that is preached today is a gospel of follow the prophet, and if you just follow the prophet, your salvation is guaranteed. Joseph preached to the Relief Society. He taught them Ezekiel chapter 14 and said, and that's a really good chapter to read. Read about that. And Joseph said that the people's minds had been darkened because they depended too much on the prophet, meaning himself, and that they would remain under condemnation as they put their faith in the arm of the flesh and in a man, that they needed to have spirituality in and of themselves. And we get all of the past history, I think. I mean, we read about it. Everybody knows the timeline and the stories of the Bible and the Book of Mormon. They realize that apostasy was the norm and not the exception. And yet in our day, we say, it's different now. There will be no apostasy. Everything is fine. Even though the first 10 years of the church, 15 years of the church until Joseph was killed, was a huge struggle and a huge fight and persecution and disagreements. But somehow after Joseph died, everything's good. All is well in Zion. So the question is it different today? Is the gospel different? Are different things required of us than were required of those in the Book of Mormon and those who receive salvation in the Bible. And the obvious answer is no, it's not different, it's the same. But I think to a large degree, we have scriptures, we read them, and then we don't think they apply to us anymore. We think salvation, we think we're not Pharisees when we are. We think that it no longer applies, that as long as we have our membership records on the rolls of a particular church, then God will, that guarantees salvation in some way. But the truth is, those who get to the celestial kingdom have to be of the same caliber as Jesus. And Jesus was someone that didn't spend his time paying homage to the leaders of the church and obeying the arm of the flesh, when he knew very well from reading the scriptures that there were things that needed to be corrected. And so he spent a lot of his time actually kind of ripping on the Pharisees and those people of his day that said, Abraham is our father. We are good. We're saved. Because we are in this box, we don't need to change. And I guess the real question is, there's a South Park little clip that I remember seeing like 15 years ago, and it's supposed to be after this life, and everybody's waiting around in hell, and a guy comes up to the microphone and said, well, you guys all got the wrong answer, and everybody's saying, well, what was the true church? And the guy looks there and he says, it was the Mormons. The Mormons, that was the right answer. And everybody's kind of shocked and like, oh my gosh, it was the Mormons that were right all along. Well, it's not about being right. It's not about having your eggs in the right basket. It really is about your heart. God looks on your heart. He looks on your offerings. Joseph Smith told us in the Lectures on Faith that the great prototype of salvation is Jesus. And he said, in order to go where Jesus is, you need to be precisely as he is. That a religion that does not require the sacrifice of all things does not have the power unto life and salvation. And everything is required of our heart. Everything is required. And the natural man being an enemy to God, we have to be born again. We have to give our heart and our soul and our spirit over, so that we are on the same, basically on the same frequency as Jesus was. And that requires a lot. I think a lot of people see people who are doing things differently than is prescribed by the church, and they say that person is on a high road to apostasy. In fact, I have that in the comments. You are on the high road to apostasy. Do you see where you're going? This is dangerous. And that's really fear-based religion. But yes, we should all check ourselves as far as where our heart is. That being said, if we find ourselves on the outs with the church, and we are doing the best we can to live as Jesus would in our shoes, then we are following that great prototype, which is Jesus himself. So, are things different this time around? Do we just get to throw in with the church and make sure that we got baptized in the right place and we don't have to worry about living as Jesus did, even though that's been the pattern time after time after time in the scriptures? I don't think that true religion has changed. We are just fooling ourselves when we think that there is something different required of us than was required of those people who we see in the scriptures who worked miracles by faith and rose up and were and lived a different religion than let's say the mainstream.